And start. Hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar on behalf of ACRO. I just want to say thank you guys so much for taking your time out of your afternoon to join us today. I'm going to give folks about 60 seconds to come in virtually and take a seat, and then we'll get into our tech spiel and I'll pass off our mic and we'll start. But again, thank you so much for being here. I always thought to myself that I'll get some background music for this part because sometimes it just gets awkward and silent, but again, we'll go ahead and get started here in just a second, but thanks for being here, guys. So for those of you guys who haven't used Zoom before, if you take a look on the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a lot of different navigation tools. And what I want to point you towards are the chat features as well as our Q&A. We really do encourage you guys to engage not only with panelists, but with one another in the chat section. So letting us know where you're from and where you're joining us from and what brought you here. That's all stuff that can go into our chat. And when you do send it, just make sure to send it to everyone. If you have a question specific to myself as your tech person or to any of our panelists, feel free to message the hosts and panelists directly and we will see it. For all of your questions though, I know there'll be Q&A at the very end, but sometimes you'll have those questions pop up and you don't want to forget them. And so the Q&A is a great place to stick that. I know that our panelists will be keeping a close eye on that. And some of the questions, depending on their relevancy to the discussion, will be answered on site and some of them will be answered towards the end of the webinar. And the final thing that I just want to cover is that this is a recorded session. And so please do be mindful of that. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Heather. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks everyone for joining today. I appreciate everyone's time, especially on a later afternoon for some of us. Just a few additional housekeeping items before we get started today. We did want to take some time to say if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics for Parchment, we are always looking for new ideas. So there is an email address there that you can send those to. You can also subscribe to our blog if you want future updates on webinars. And finally, just like Christina said, this webinar is being recorded, so we will happily share this out if there are other folks at your institution that weren't able to join that you think might benefit from this. All right, well, we'll start today. I just want to say thank you again for joining. My name is Heather Hoskins. I am the manager for admission services at Parchment. We want to thank ACRO for their partnership on this webinar and also the greater ACRO community for participating, as well as our fantastic esteemed panel as well. Really, the central question today for the webinar is how do you start a career in admissions or enrollment management from your current job? Knowing that this invitation went out to the wider ACRO community, I'm sure there are folks that might be in the registrar's office, maybe some admissions folks. So we really just want to hear from our panel today, what was their path? How did they get to the place that they are today? And we hope that after hearing their advice, their stories, that you leave this webinar with a renewed sense of excitement about your future career in admissions, enrollment management, and just higher education in general. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Heather Hoskins. Again, I'm the manager for admission services at Parchment. I've been here at Parchment for about 3.5 years. And prior to that, I was an admissions counselor at University of Phoenix for about 8 years. So I do have a bit of experience in admissions, albeit in a non-traditional environment, but certainly understand and appreciate and value the role that admissions plays in higher education. I'm personally a first generation high school student, college student, sorry, and I was also the first person in my extended family to obtain an advanced degree as well. So again, just really passionate about higher education. So we'll start now by introducing our panel. We're going to have some fun today. Of course, you want to know who you're talking to, you want to know where they're from, but Parchment loves an icebreaker question. So as we go through our panelists today, we are going to ask them to share what their favorite ice cream flavor was when they were a child and what their favorite ice cream flavor is today. So let's go ahead and start with our first panelist, which is Erin Hutchinson.
Good afternoon. I'm Erin. I'm Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management at Earlham College. And when I was a kid, black raspberry was my flavor of choice. I think because it was purple. But as an adult, I'm from New England, so Ben & Jerry's is near and dear to my heart. It was coffee toffee bar crunch for a while, but now it's coffee buzz buzz buzz. I need that caffeine.
Fantastic. And Kim?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kim Medina. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Enrollment Management at Colorado Mesa University over on the western slope of Colorado and Grand Junction. When I was a kid, my favorite would have been bubblegum ice cream. So picking out all those pieces of bubblegum out of what was probably vanilla. Now, my favorite is vanilla ice cream, but it's because I make a mean chocolate sauce that has Kahlua in it. And so it pairs very well to vanilla ice cream. So a little bit boring, but that's because I jazz it up with some hot sauce.
I'm going to be asking for that recipe, Kim. All right, James.
Good afternoon, everyone from Seattle, Washington. My name is James Miller, Associate Provost and Dean of Admission at Seattle University, and my pronouns are he, him, his. Favorite flavor of ice cream all the way through mint chip. But the big evolution in my life is getting away from the neon green mint chip and getting to the actual sort of like natural color and texture that mint chip ice cream should be. There's no reason it needs to be neon green. So that's my big lifestyle evolution, and definitely Tillamook all day, born and raised in Oregon. So
I'm hearing a lot of maturity in our answers of what we enjoy now as adults. All right, and David.
Get ready for that to change. So hi everybody, I'm David Burge. I tend to just go by Burge, as there are many Davids about. I'm Vice President for Enrollment Management at George Mason University, which is in the Commonwealth of Virginia, just right on the edge of Washington, D.C. My favorite, my favorite ice cream flavor, and I'm going to say this because I was a kid in the 80s. So I was a kid right when frozen yogurt started kind of marching onto the scene at scale. And I liked a very basic strawberry. Okay, so like back when they first came out, I don't remember, like the whole point now is you just shove a bunch of stuff on top of your frozen yogurt and make it the least healthy thing that you've got. Back then, and we didn't do that, at least not in Kansas. So I like that, very simple. Now my tastes are far more complex, and I have been known to tackle an entire container of Chunky Monkey from I believe that's Ben & Jerry's. So I become more complicated as I've grown up, and maybe less mature.
Well, I would argue Ben & Jerry's, that always seemed fancy to me as a kid. So I'm going to say it's somewhat mature. It's on the line. And because I want to join the fun as well, I'll have to say my favorite as a kid was pralines and cream from Baskin-Robbins. And today, much like Erin, much like Kim, much like James, I'm more like a more mature flavor now. Definitely anything coffee. There's a fantastic Vietnamese coffee flavored ice cream at a place here in Phoenix, Arizona called Churn, and highly recommend it, especially in a pretzel cone, which is a bit of a surprise twist on that. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so everyone can see our faces as we dive into this conversation. I'm really just your host for these proceedings, and hopefully we'll have a fantastic conversation. We want to start it off today just by getting the story of our panelists, how they ended up where they are today. And we will go ahead and start with Erin. If you would tell us kind of about your path into admissions. How did you get to Earlham College?
Okay, well, I'll start by saying it was never my intention to work in higher ed. Everything about my journey to and through college was problematic. First, my parents encouraged me to go to college, but the others who were meant to help me along the way, first they told me I was never going to get into the college that I applied to. And then when I got in, they told me I only got in because of affirmative action. My familiarity with college as a first-generation college student who grew up in the woods of Maine was the University of Maine at Orono, primarily because I had done Upward Bound on their campus for a number of summers in a row. And then I'm also a child of the 80s, and in the 80s, onto the scene came the US News and World Report, and it was at the checkout line, and I learned about a couple other colleges that way on the cover, the ones that, you know, made the cover. And so I actually applied to the college that I applied to, Harvard, based on the fact that it was in that magazine and it was the closest one to Maine that was near the top of the list. That's literally how I chose a college. And then when I got to college, I felt wholly unprepared for how to navigate that world. And I received no support when I was there. Keep in mind, this is the late 80s. So when I left, I figured I was leaving higher education in my rearview mirror. And then fast forward 10 years and a master's degree, and I had just finished my second year of teaching high school in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was struck by how unsupported the seniors were as they were preparing to graduate. And I saw myself in them. And I started to think that maybe I should get involved, like to help break this cycle of students who were struggling to figure out if college was for them. And if so, what school might be a good fit. At the same time, my husband, who had been coaching basketball at Case Western Reserve University, was approached about going down to coach at Washington and Lee University in Southwest Virginia. And his response was, I'm interested, but I'd like to know if there might be an opportunity for my awesome spouse to come with me. So I sent my resume and I got hired as the coordinator for multicultural recruitment in the admissions office there. And so once I had my foot in the door, I was interested in so many different aspects of the job: international recruitment, event management, merit scholarship, administration. And so I kept taking on additional responsibilities and kept getting promoted, eventually landing at the number 3 spot in the office, senior associate director of admissions, in the last couple of years of my tenure there. But during a stint of frustration and disillusionment, I chose to leave my job in admissions and start my own business. And it was a fiber art shop, and hands down, best job in the world, loved it. But something was missing. I missed feeling like I was making a substantive difference in the lives of young people. And the number of people who came into my shop, because it was literally around the corner from the university, to say that they or their son or daughter was at W&L because of guidance I had given them, it got me thinking, like, maybe admissions is where I'm supposed to be. Like, I should listen to what the universe is telling me. So when there was a change in leadership there and an opportunity came up to be a part-time seasonal reader and help with the scholarship competition that I'd once run, I jumped on it. But eventually, living in Southwest Virginia with 2 rapidly growing Black teenage boys became problematic. And I uprooted my family and we moved to Massachusetts because I'm from New England. And I said, things can be different. I wanted them to see the world a little bit differently. So I was again working full-time with young people but on the other side of the desk as a college advisor at Deerfield Academy. And I was there for 5 years, relatively happy. And then my husband again decides he didn't want to coach basketball anymore. He wants to be an athletic director. And he ended up getting a job at Earlham College. And at first I was still in Massachusetts with my son, but after about a year, fortunately for me, an opportunity opened up here at Earlham, and I must have said something right in the interview because here I am today. And that's how I got here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Erin. I'm going to go to my other Brady Bunch tile here, and let's ask James what his story was.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. I would say starting off at the beginning where Erin did as a low information college searcher, right? Applied to 2 colleges, didn't visit either, had no concept of the admissions process other than what I needed to do to get in. Now the area where I share a lot of common ground with folks who got into this business is at some point I got hooked into the campus tour program at my alma mater at Oregon State, and had a great time giving tours. Loved it as a job. I grew up in a small farming community called Woodburn, Oregon. And so the idea that I could work in the summertime giving tours and not be on a combine, not be moving irrigation, not be doing any of the other number of less exciting things that one can do in a small town, it was a pretty amazing opportunity, but still had no general concept that admissions was a profession or a place where one could work. I sort of had to make a long story short, sort of had a crisis of direction at the end of my senior year, right as I'm getting ready to graduate. And somebody in the admissions office there said, "Hey, you're great at what you do in the tour program, and we've got an open admissions counselor job, and you ought to apply for it." I applied for it, got it, thinking, yeah, I'll do this for a couple of years, and then when the real ship comes by, I'll hitch onto that one. And 16 going on 17 years later, here I am. And my admissions life has taken me, starting in recruitment, actually through the middle of my career. I worked at a couple of different campuses leading admissions operations, data, and technology. And springboarding from that at the University of San Francisco to lead the admission office at University of Puget Sound. I'm now at Seattle University as the chief admissions officer here, and it's been an incredible journey. But one of the cool things about my process is that, number one, having had the opportunity to dabble in a variety of different spaces within the admissions office, really understanding how the engine room or the boiler room works in the admissions office has been a huge advantage. But also, as Erin said, at the end of the day, there is something really special about helping students navigate this process better than you did, right? And seeing the light bulb go on at an appropriate time rather than having to have the light bulb go on way too late to make some of the course corrections that need to be made is the thing that keeps me doing it, right? There are a lot of great things about the job that I do, but working with students when I get the chance to do it is the best part. So it's been a really fun journey, and just, again, really glad to be on the panel with everyone today.
Thanks, James. How about you, Kim?
Hi, thanks for letting me share. I grew up in a small town that had about 5,000 people, isolated. Nearest town was about 60 miles away. Both directions had mountain passes. And my family, when we traveled, we went to Western Kansas to visit my grandparents. So I did not start out as somebody who was worldly by any means. I came to what is now Colorado Mesa University, was then Mesa State College, because I had attended Girls State here and I had attended basketball camp here. And so it was comfortable, and I didn't have to go over to in Colorado, we have the Front Range, which is the Denver Metro, I-25 corridor, and then we have the Western Slope. And for me, I was very comfortable staying on the Western Slope. I too started in admissions as a tour guide. We did not have the sophisticated training, the programs that we have. We would have large programs, and my director would say, "Hey, do you have any friends that you just want to have come and work and give tours?" We would never do that today. So it was definitely not as sophisticated as we are all working now. We also didn't have an orientation program. And so my senior year, I was offered a tuition scholarship to develop an orientation program. This was before NODA, before there was actually really science, or at least science that had made it to Western Colorado, around really how you transition students onto success. Worked here for about 3 years as an admissions counselor. I had never been in a taxi. I had never driven in a city. This was before, I'm dating myself, GPS, cell phones. So I really credit so much of my independence and ability to be resilient and overcome obstacles with those early days as a road warrior and admissions counselor. I underestimate that until I think back about it. Similar to Erin, life, family caused me to make some pretty interesting career choices. I stayed in admissions and worked at a urban university, University of Colorado at Denver. And then my then husband got a job in Western Kansas, and there was a community college there. And I worked in financial aid at that community college. Knew nothing about financial aid. My family hadn't applied for financial aid. We always wanted to get back to Colorado, and I actually was planning on making a career move out of admissions and higher ed, and was getting my master's in school counseling because I wanted to be on the other side of the desk. I love the part of our job that gets to work with students and families, and felt like that could really be a niche for me and would be a good thing for my family. And unfortunately, I found myself as a single parent and couldn't make that move. So I spent 10 years at a private institution, small private institution with roots in the New England area, and then moved to a selective STEM engineering only institution as their director, of admissions. But I always felt like to really gain enrollment and really take what we do in admissions and really help families through the process, that if we could apply some of those tactics and some of the ways we approach admissions to retention, in terms of financial aid and advising, then that would, one, selfishly relieve some pressure from admissions. But also, that's what I hated, seeing students that maybe didn't get the treatment that the way we treated them in admissions, that really, for lack of a better word, whining and dining, that I felt like we could apply some of those principles to our enrollment services area. And so a year ago, had an opportunity to come back to my alma mater and build an enrollment management division with our new president. It was 30 years to the month that I started my first job in higher ed, that I got to start back at CMU. And we are building with student accounts, a one-stop, the registrar's office, advising and financial aid and admissions, a truly way to make sure that we're always recruiting our students through to graduation.
What a great full circle moment, Kim. I love that story.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Burge, what about you?
Thanks. And Kim, I totally want to connect offline about Western Kansas connections. All right, which we will definitely.
The world
do.
is small. I bet there are some.
Indeed. So I'm just a kid from Wichita, Kansas, and graduated high school in 1992. I had the privilege of watching both my father and my mother work their way through their degrees while I was a child, and could, I guess, sort of had it grilled into me the importance, how important it is to get this degree, the sacrifices that you should be willing to make to get this degree. And, flashing forward, 30, 40 years later, the part of my job that brings me the greatest sense of satisfaction is getting students to go to college who otherwise would not have gone to college. It has taken me a minute to find a position and an institution where I get to do that. Meaning when I started, so my undergraduate, I was a transfer student. So I started at one school, Kansas State University, and it's a wonderful institution that I would recommend to a wide variety of people, but it didn't fit for me. What I learned in that moment when I was recruited to Kansas State is because I was a high school debater. And so they were recruiting me to be a part of their debate team. And what I learned about recruitment and before I even knew that you could have a career out of it, it is that personalization and the relationships matter, because it was about one call, one night, one phrase that got me to go to K-State. I ended up transferring around, going back to Wichita, ended up getting my degree from the University of Kansas, which is where I had, working through college, I worked in the University Placement Center. To date myself, I would use carbon paper in my job, just to sort of throw that out there to everybody. But near the end, when I was getting ready to graduate, I said, I need more money. I would like to have more disposable income to do whatever 22-year-old young men like to do. And I saw a job as a telecounselor, a student telecounselor in the admissions office. And the only reason I did it is because it paid more money. I did it and I loved it. And I had so much fun. And it was in that moment that I was introduced to a little piece of software, long gone, I think, called EMIS Plus. And it was the first, everybody, James gets it, Kim gets it. Like, that's absolutely one of the first time I could ever, we didn't even use the phrase CRM at that point in time. It was just recruitment software, whatever that means. And then I left, I graduated, and I tried to make it as a working actor for 2 years. Spoiler alert, failed miserably. But for one thing, I met my wife doing that work. And then that was anything but a failure. It came back to the University of Kansas as what they called a scholarship counselor, which was code for a high ability recruiter. When I started this work, I thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to be recruiting students to go to school who wouldn't go otherwise. That's not what I was doing. I was recruiting students who would go to college and be successful no matter where they went, whether they were, many of them, whether it was Harvard or Butler County Community College there in central Kansas. And yet I was still satisfied, right? And I learned a little bit more about that relationship piece when I did it. And that's when I kind of like Erin's story, tried to gobble up as much knowledge and skills as I could. I ran the transfer operation at KU for a year while they figured out where they wanted it to live. I set up the first online application, which this will make your toes turn. But all it did was email the information. It would take the application, they'd hit submit, and an email would come into the school with all the information kind of printed out, including credit card and social security number, everybody. Like, these were the Wild West days back at that point in time. I took it over. I'm not going to say that I fixed it. I'm just going to say that I took it over and did that type of work. But the moment that I crossed over from this being a job into a career is when I left the University of Kansas and I went to the University of Nebraska, following my boss and mentor, which later we'll talk about mentors, I'm sure. But I picked up the family, moved them to Nebraska, spent 7 years there as their associate dean for recruitment. Flash forward a few kids later, move, and then I'm ready to start thinking about a change. And someone who I knew well, a good friend of mine, mentor of mine, had taken the vice president for enrollment at Arizona State University and was looking for a director there. And I put my name in, was actually somewhat surprised that I advanced to the finalists, and then moved out to Phoenix, where I was the executive director of admissions services at Arizona State University. And I did that because I thought I could help get students to college, because this is a place that had a reputation then and still has a reputation now for being sort of student focused, having scale, right? It's a big place, all are invited. They work hard to try to make sure everybody of all levels are successful. And that was what I wanted to be a part of. And in that moment I was, right? That's the first time. It was actually the second time I was able to move jobs that I felt like I was doing the thing that I wanted to do. And learned all kinds of stuff in the process. ASU was a master's class in higher education that I'm grateful that I have with me. Eventually, though, you realize that the seat on the bus that you have is not necessarily the seat on the bus that you want. And I was able to maybe have a bigger impact at a different university in an elevated position. And thanks to some good mentorship, I believed that I could do it, even if I maybe couldn't do it right away. I believed I could do it eventually. And came out here to George Mason, which is, and to Kim's point, has given me the opportunity to not only worry about the incoming numbers and add things like graduate to the mix, not just undergraduate, but then also focus on what we're doing with our continuing students and how we are applying some of these tactics here. Mason is this is not a commercial, but Mason's one of those places, right, where we're majority minority. We've got about a third of our 40,000 students are Pell eligible students. We've got a diverse international portfolio, hashtag not just China, not just India, not just the Gulf, but rather countries that represent that. And like, so that type of stuff really gets me going on all of this. And as well as leadership, right? I'm quite confident that as leadership continues to grow and evolve in these places, that I will feel more and less comfortable with it. But Heather, thanks for the opportunity to kind of sound off on that.
Yeah,
Thanks, my panelists, for
absolutely.
sharing.
Absolutely. And I mentioned at the top that I myself was a first generation college student, and I did that at Arizona State. So great work there. That's right. Go Devils. I really would love to, thanks for sharing your stories, everyone. I love that we have kind of a breadth of kind of the traditional route, right? You started as that college tour guide, and then Erin's path, which is a little bit more untraditional for sure. But I'd really love to hear from all of you, regardless of how you came to the role, what was that really specific turning point where you realize this isn't just the job anymore. This is my career. This is what I plan to do, for the rest of my working life. I'd love to start with James. I think you called it there. You had like a light bulb moment. Like, tell us about that.
Well, I think just the first thing I would touch on is something Burge said, which is somebody told me that it could be a career for me. And I know that sounds sort of reductive, but honestly, and I would say if you're out there with people reporting to you, telling them what you think they can do is the first step in helping them realize that they can do it. And was an enormous step for me. So I got a lot of reinforcement that this could be a career for me. I think that was important. Moving into operations, data, and technology, I think was really important for me. I studied economics in undergrad. I came to the work with some baseline analytical skills, an appreciation for math, an appreciation for social data. And so the opportunity to work with that side of my brain in this business, which you wouldn't anticipate, right? You would expect that this is an entirely person-oriented profession, and it is at all times, but a lot of the work happens behind the scenes, behind the front doors of the admissions office. And then I think the third thing, the light bulb moment for me, was the first student that I really helped. And I can still remember this kid's face as clear as day, a student who came in the spring of her senior year in a complete sort of academic disaster, wanting to enroll, and sort of gave the student the not right now answer, worked with them through every step of the process, and still remember them showing up on their first day, walking into the office, just wanting to show me their ID card and seeing a transformed person, right? Not just a person who had accomplished a goal, but a transformed person. And just the goosebump moment of being in the middle of that process for a person was, I think, the transformative or light bulb moment that helped me realize this is what I'm supposed to do, right? This is what I'm meant to be involved with and engaged with. So I think, again, to sort of recap, somebody told me, found a way to connect my skills, talents, and abilities to something in the work I didn't know existed, and just really the passion for helping students navigate the process.
Great. Bert, you mentioned that same idea, right, of someone telling you you could and you believed it, so you went forward with it. Was that your turning point, or was there somewhere else in your career that was kind of that turning point for you?
Well, that's a big part of it. I used to tell a story about how, I was hired by a man at KU. He promoted me once, he promoted me twice, and then he hired me to follow him to his next appointment. And I always tell the story, like, you don't need to get the world to believe in you. You just need to get the right person to believe in you. And luckily it didn't end there. I was told by my mentor at Arizona State, like, no, one day you can do enrollment management if you want to. The story I want to tell, though, is actually, it's going to sound like pandering. And Christina, this is for you and ACRO. I would say my light bulb moment might have been the ACRO National Conference. I want to say 2001, Minneapolis, where it was the first time attending a national conference. I, again, not knowing my own limitations, I submitted to give a presentation while I was there, even though I never attended a national conference. And I asked her, how hard could it be? And it was a room, it was full, you know, as national conferences tend to be, even on mundane topics. There's something about seeing all these people from all of these different institutions who were doing the similar work, who nerded out on this stuff the same way that I did. I felt a part of a community of professionals, and that was intoxicating to me. And I'd say it was not long after that, within 18 months, that I left KU, again, not because I was unhappy. I was blissfully happy there, but because I saw an opportunity to have a career. So
Great. Erin, what about you?
I think, as I referenced in my first answer, it took leaving admissions for me to realize that that it might be my calling, and just the continual, I mean, to this day, people that I advised in some capacity over the years can stay in touch with me, and I'm meeting their kids, and I'm going to their weddings, and they continue, like, there are like anniversaries where they reach out and they say, I am a lawyer because I met you and I made this choice and you helped me through XYZ. And I know they would probably still be a lawyer anyway, but I really appreciate being part of people's stories. And I think, when I left admissions initially, I had some frustrations. I mentioned that already. When I realized that maybe it's what I should be doing, I also realized it is in my capacity to change the things that I don't believe are right. And so I was very clear with my husband about, hey, if I think I'm going to get back into this work, but I have a vision, and I have some non-negotiables, and I wasn't sure that was going to work, and it did. And so I think the turning point was walking away and realizing how much I missed it, and then also realizing that I have in my capacity the ability to affect change in an institution that, quite frankly, historically, it was not built for people like me. And so I appreciate the opportunity to make it more accessible to people like me.
That's fabulous. What about you, Kim? What was your turning point?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I too have similar stories of students that you've connected with, and you helped remove a barrier, and that's really important to me. I knew I wanted to help students get into I highly believe in higher education, and I knew in some capacity that I wanted to help people regardless of which side of the desk I was on. And that's why I pursued my school counseling master's. But I think the turning point for me to stay on the higher ed side was actually, I mentioned that I became a single parent. For about 10 years, I was a single parent of 2 girls. And when I was the newly appointed director of admissions at the small private institution in Denver, I had a staff member come and say, "You're a single mom. You're not going to be able to do this." And I was like, "Oh, just watch me." Now, I had incredibly supportive parents that when I needed to travel, I mean, I recognize how very lucky I am, and that single parents sometimes truly are single. So I don't want to minimize the privilege that I had in having my parents who were retired and who were able to come and stay for the visit weekends and stay for the travel. But it was sort of then that I was like, you know what? and admissions, we all know we're never done. We're always, you sit a class, but you're just never truly done. And I love that about this work, but then it's really hard to disengage. But it really, as I was thinking about this question, somebody telling me I couldn't do this because of my family situation was sort of like, oh, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I think for me, that was a turning point to stay in the higher ed side and not go into the post-secondary side or the secondary side.
As someone who also loves to prove people wrong, I love that story, Kim. And I love that story too, that sense of community, your family that really helped you to continue down this path so that you could prove people wrong, right? So I want to switch gears a little bit along those lines and start talking about mentorship. Bert, you mentioned before there was someone in your career path that really helped you get to where you are. So I'd love to start there. Who was that? How did they help you kind of get to the place that you are today?
Sure. So the director at the University of Kansas and later the dean at the University of Nebraska, his name's Alan Cerveny. I will say that I worked for him for a grand total of about 11 years, formative years, meaning age 24 to about 35. I'll tell one story. There's of many that could be told, but I walked into his office after, I guess it was maybe a year and a half on the job, maybe even less than that, maybe less than a year. And I said, hey boss, I wouldn't want to assume that my issues were the same as yours were, Aaron, but I felt like this just wasn't for me, and it didn't fit, and there are things I didn't like. And I had found a job that would be a corporate headhunter and make a whopping, 10-15% more than I did here. And for, young married guy, I'm not all about the money, by the way. I feel like all my stories are about the money, but you got to own that money is part of it. And he just sat me down and he said, hey, look, you can do this. I can tell you, I know you. I don't think that you will do this for very long. And that it's like you're running away from something, but what I will tell you is that if you take some time in this as a profession, and if you commit to doing certain things, you will get to a point where you can be the power, the person who can make the choices. Very much what Aaron said about like building what you want it to be. The money comes over time. It's not about getting the money for what you're doing now, but it's about getting the experience to get the position where that can follow. And signaled to me, just in the simplest terms, just said, I want you to stay. I want you to do this work. And actually, it was so funny. It wasn't that long after is when he said, I want you to be president of NACAC one day. And I was in 2016, and I called him afterwards. I'm like, dude, you might have said that as a joke or a retention technique, but it stuck with me for 15 years. And finally, kind of, I was willing to stick my neck out because you believed in me. And so it is a moment of you never know the phrases or the words or the moments that are going to stick with you. And that's why you have to be sort of like present at all times in all those interactions, because I guarantee the inverse is true, right? Like, you didn't ask me about the people who were negative influences in my career. And arguably there were probably more of those than there were positive ones through the years. But I don't remember those. I don't dwell on those. I dwell on those moments of sort of grace and inspiration. And they're all around us. And this guy gave me mine.
Great. James, what about you?
Yeah, I'll mention a couple folks. The director of undergrad, or the director of admissions at Oregon State when I started there, was Michelle Sandlin, who is familiar to many in the acro community, and is the kind of person who is just omni-aware of every opportunity that is available. And so in that way, Michelle is a bit of a one-off in some cases, because you can't keep up. You can only hope to sort of run alongside breathlessly. But at the same time, was someone who patterned so many things that I either consciously or unconsciously still really try to do for myself and do for my team. Simple things like helping to explain to new staff how the office was organized, and hey, if that work looks interesting to you over there, here's the pathway, right? And just the simplicity of that, and it's sort of a simplicity that we often fail to observe in our profession. But also someone who is just always there with words of wisdom on how to handle a challenge or handle a problem. And the thing that she said to me when I left to take the job at University of San Francisco is, if it doesn't scare you a little bit, it's probably not worth doing. And I think about that almost every day. The other person I would mention is I had an opportunity to work with Steve Syverson for a few years. Steve Syverson was the vice president for enrollment at Lawrence in Wisconsin, and we worked together at University of Washington Bothell for about 3 years. And Steve was a person who, as the mood of our work has turned very cynical in recent years, mainly because of the conversation around our work, not truly because of the work we're all doing every day, is someone who really taught me at a time where it could be very easy to say, you know what, I'm going to step outside of this. This is exhausting. I don't really want to deal with this any longer. Just really always had a nose for what was either pragmatic or optimistic about a situation, right? Rather than falling prey to the cynicism of the moment that you were in, always looking for a silver lining might be the wrong way to put it, but always looking for the sort of right path or the bright path through a really difficult situation. And I would just say in general, I've been so incredibly fortunate. I've worked for some amazing people and had amazing mentors who, if not for their presence in my life, this would not be a thing, right? So I'm just eternally grateful to all the folks I've been able to work with over the years.
Kim, you seem to be shaking your head in agreement with James there.
Yeah, I agree. I've been really fortunate to have amazing leadership. And I actually also have had amazing mentors. I actually had experiences though where I was reached out to by people that I didn't even know, because I had been in I had done a presentation to Burge's example of his aha moment. I did a presentation at a community college forum with the president that went to this small private institution, who actually said, I was impressed, I want you to come work for me. And the same thing with the current president. So I would say to emerging professionals, and really I say this to everybody on my team, you never know who you're going to come across. And it's every day is a job interview, and sometimes you don't really want a job interview, but but I've had these really odd opportunities that people have reached out that I didn't even know that I had done something to influence their opinion and their confidence in me without even knowing me or what I thought knowing my work to come and do some interesting things. Was interesting. So it's not really a mentorship that you knew about, but it's just somebody that you influenced, that people are, and I think now more than ever, when we're all looking at staff, we're probably all doing that, right? When we're at conferences and we're out doing things, we're having to recruit our own talent. And so I think there's going to be even more opportunity like I had with our current job market.
Yeah, I made a joke to the panel. We had a prep session before the call. I made a joke that they might want to put their college up on their Zoom background, because after listening to this, folks might want to come work for them. And I see, yep, several of you took my advice. So Erin, tell me who is your mentor in your, you took my advice. So we'll go to you next.
I really wish I'd had a mentor at some point in my life. And, maybe there's different reasons for that. Maybe coming into the career as a, 30 something with children, like maybe no one says, oh, I need to take her under my wing. Maybe I just appeared like I knew what I was doing. I didn't. And I particularly wish that I had had a mentor who was a woman of color. I'm 51 years old. I have in 19 years of education, never had a Black teacher or a Black professor. In almost 40 continuous years of employment, I have never had a Black supervisor, let alone a Black woman. And that hits me hard. So I hope to serve in that capacity for somebody else. I would say the closest I've ever had to a mentor would be Julia Kozak, who retired from the W&L admissions office right before I got there. And we were in a quilt guild together. I'm a quilter. It's my passion. When I'm not working, I'm quilting or knitting. And I would see her once a month, and she'd say, "Hey, what's happening in the office?" And it was nice to have somebody who knew it, who was outside of it and not part of it anymore, just to talk about it with. It was not anything official, but I do really appreciate her being a sounding board for me. And when I made the decision to leave, she made me feel more valued in one conversation than I felt at that institution with the people I worked with. And she said, "You can't leave. You're the successor. You're meant to be the next dean." And I left anyway, but she provided a lot of the affirmation that I needed at that point in my life. And I aspire to be a Julia Kozak to somebody else.
Yeah, that unfortunately, it sounds like there's folks in the chat that are saying that they've experienced the same of not having that mentorship. And I know it's the goal of organizations like ACRO and other peer networks to connect folks. So hoping that others can find each other, mentor each other as they make this pathway into leadership within admissions enrollment management. It's so important. We're nearing the end of our time here, so we're going to jump to the last question. Would really love to hear from each of you. As society is kind of moving past this idea of hustle culture, I think we're doing a lot more to acknowledge things like burnout and mental health in general. I would love to hear kind of what balance looks like for each of you today, and what advice would you give to admissions professionals, road warriors, if you will, that are listening to the panel today. Let's start with James.
First and foremost, the sort of hustle culture or grind culture, I believe that there is a directly inverse relationship between the number of times you post online about your hashtag hustle, your hashtag grind, and the actual hustle or grind. And the reason I say that is I think there has been a huge emphasis recently placed on demonstrating how hard you're working. And what we're really trying to reorient our staff to is, hey, let's really focus on results. What success looks like is on task at 8 a.m., laptops closing down at 5 p.m., everything is done, everything is tucked in, and everything looks wonderful. And folks go home to a nice meal at home, enjoying themselves, whatever it might be. So we're really trying to focus our folks at Seattle U away from the last person that turns the light out is the next leader in this office, and really focusing on what you accomplish, what your results are, right? And I think I just want to say that right up front, because I think that those two things, the need to feel like you're demonstrating hustle and burnout, they're often directly linked to one another. I would say in terms of creating balance for myself or for others, the thing that, just because of some stuff in my own personal life that I've been navigating over the last 2.5, 3 years, the biggest thing I'm trying to focus on is trying to be at the places that people are going to remember me being present, right? And very, very rarely is that an optional work thing that takes me away from my niece, my nephew, my son, right? what it is the things that, you know, those people are going to remember you being present at. They're going to remember the emotion of your presence. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but it's what I'm trying to focus on is being really thoughtful about my time, being really thoughtful about my energy and where I am and where I am not, as days go by and I plan my calendar, because especially as your career progresses, the opportunities for you to be at something else, at something additional, are infinite. So you will be defined, I think, in many ways as much by what you carefully choose not to do as by what you take on or spread yourself too thin to do.
And Zoom has only made that more evident, right? Because now every minute of your day is scheduled. Yes, including this hour that we've had you all for. Kim, what about you?
Yeah, I loved what James had to say because I think particularly during the pandemic, we're at a regional, rather rural public institution. So, you know, we're the school that you're reading about and Nathan McGraw is writing about. And so my predecessor, through no fault of their own, it really was because of the pandemic, the challenges of enrollment. If you weren't throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck, you weren't trying hard enough to enroll a class. And so that is the culture that I inherited and quickly saw without much time that we weren't going to manage this way. And so I actually really enjoy working, and I'm at that stage in my life where I'm an empty nester and I went from work to kid activities, and that those kids activities were what caused me to leave work, and now I don't have those. And so I need to join and learn how to quilt with Erin because I don't have a hobby. And so I'm in so recognizing that about myself, though, I recognize I'm a relatively new leader here. People are watching. And so I am very careful about when I send emails, when people see me taking a break. I'm trying to very much model there is no way that we can do all the things that you think that you should be doing. And it's working, but I recognize in myself I have work to do to stop the grind, because I find it motivating, but I know it's not healthy for me or for my staff. And so I've been very strategic about things. I've taught our supervisors, I need you to look at your staff schedule. I need you to give breaks when you can, flex time, especially around the busy travel and events. And that was something that was completely foreign to them before I got here. It was go, 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 go. If you need a sick day, take one. Well, we should not be getting sick because of our schedule. So I'm still a work in progress.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Well, Burge and Erin, I'm sure you would have a fantastic answer to this, but unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time today. So I do want to thank everyone on our panel for sharing their stories. This is how we get better. This is how we make those decisions on whether or not this is our career path. Hopefully you've heard something today that's clicked with you. And if something clicked in the negative way, don't tell your leaders it was me that helped you get there. But if you are interested in this topic and you want to continue to learn more about it, we do want to share here, and I'm going to share my screen one more time, that Parchment is going to be taking this kind of to the next level at the upcoming AcroSem conference in Toronto. So we are going to be spending about an hour and a half together at AcroSem with another panel of other professionals, including Erin. So thank you, Erin, for joining us in person as well, where we will be discussing this topic again, just at a deeper level. And we'll also have an external consultant coming in as well to give a presentation on some of the skills and things that you would need to level up your career in enrollment management. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to Acro, and I want to pass the mic back to Christina.
I forgot my My camera thingy was off. Guys, thank you, thank you, thank you. On behalf of ACRO to our attendees, thank you guys so much again for taking time out of your day to join us. I don't know about you, but I know that this conversation felt like a really big hug. I think it's a really great reminder too that people are at the center of what we do, as well as how we get there. And so as leaders and in your community, please just remind the people that you're working with of their value. It has clearly impacted and does continue to impact the trajectory of people's careers. And so thank you guys so much. Again, thank you to Parchment as well for partnering with ACRO and for hosting this this webinar. We hope to see you guys at SIM to continue this conversation. This recording will be available on our webinars archive page on our website. So please feel free to check it out in the coming days when it's posted. And I'm wishing everybody a fantastic rest of their work day and week. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye, guys.
Thank you.